What happens when a black CEO boards a plane with a paid first-class ticket, only to be told, "You don't look like you belong here"? What if that CEO doesn't fight with fury, but with silence, strategy, and truth? And what if that moment, just 45 minutes long, unleashes a movement that reaches all the way to Capitol Hill? This is not just a story about a seat on a plane. This is the story of Darius Cole, a man who built an empire from nothing, only to be humiliated 30,000 feet above the ground. But instead of shouting, he listened. Instead of walking away, he stood taller. What he did next shook an entire industry to its core. Could one act of quiet dignity truly shift a billion-dollar corporation? Could it make a mother cry, a child dream, and a country finally pause to listen? You're about to find out. If you've ever been overlooked, judged, or silenced, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel if you're ready to feel something real. Let's take flight together. The boarding call for Flight 626 to Seattle echoed through Terminal B, carried by the calm chime of the gate speaker and the soft murmur of tired passengers checking their watches. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that made everyone a little slower, a little more irritable, and a little less likely to notice the details that really mattered. Darius Cole adjusted the worn strap of his leather backpack, stepped forward from his seat in the boarding area, and moved toward the first-class priority lane. He wasn't flashy, just a calm, well-built man in his mid-40s, wearing charcoal gray sneakers, a soft black pullover, and jeans that had clearly seen more meetings than runways. In one hand, he held a paperback novel. In the other, his boarding pass digital, neat, glowing on his phone screen. 1A, first class. As he reached the jet bridge entrance, the gate agent smiled briefly and scanned his phone without issue. The scanner beeped green. "Enjoy your flight." "Mr. Cole?" she said automatically, not really looking up. He nodded, stepped through, and walked the short corridor to the aircraft door, where his day was about to fracture. Inside the cabin, the lighting was warm, the scent of lemon cleaner still faint in the air. Passengers were settling in, rolling up jackets, sliding laptops into seat-back pockets. Darius found his seat 1A, far left, bulkhead window, and placed his bag gently beneath the seat in front of him. He moved without rush, as though this space, this exact seat, had been his 100 times before. He had just sat down and was buckling in when a voice, firm and clipped, interrupted the ambient calm. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up. A blonde flight attendant in her mid-30s stood above him, tablet clutched tightly to her chest. Her name tag read Heather. Her tone already said everything else. "I think you're in the wrong seat. This is first class." Darius blinked once, calmly. "Yes, it is. I'm in seat 1A." Heather's lips pressed into a line. "May I see your boarding pass? Please, of course." He pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward her. She squinted at it, didn't touch it. Her fingers remained locked on the tablet like it might fly away. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I believe you've purchased an economy ticket. We've had some confusion today with people sitting in the wrong sections." Darius tilted his head slightly. "I scanned my pass at the gate. It confirmed 1A. Heather glanced down at her tablet, tapped something with her stylus, then frowned. "I'm going to need to verify this with the gate. In the meantime, I'll need you to gather your things and move to the back so we can board other passengers." A few heads turned, row 2, row 3. Someone was already filming on their phone. Darius stayed seated, posture straight but relaxed. "I'm happy to wait while you verify," he said, "but I won't be moving seats. I paid for 1A 3 weeks ago, and I've flown this airline this seat before." Heather didn't respond. She turned and walked briskly to the galley. Darius exhaled slowly. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. From across the aisle, a businessman in 2C leaned toward him. "Buddy," he muttered under his breath, "you might just want to avoid the fuss. Not worth it." Darius didn't respond. His fingers lightly tapped the spine of his paperback. He could feel it beginning again, that thing, that heavy, slow burn in his stomach. Not anger, not yet, just weariness. Heather returned, this time with another uniform, a man in his 40s with a red lanyard and laminated badge swinging against his chest. "Kyle Benton, gate supervisor." "Sir," Kyle said flatly, "there seems to be an issue with your seating assignment. We'll need you to step out briefly while we sort it." "No," Darius replied, voice still even. "I have a confirmed first-class ticket. If there's a system error, I'm happy to help clarify it right here." Kyle's nostrils flared. "Sir, refusing to follow crew instruction can result in being removed from the aircraft, and assuming I don't belong based on appearance can result in a lawsuit," Darius said. Calm, measured, but now direct. Kyle's eyebrows lifted slightly, as though the realization had just begun to dawn, but he covered it with a thin smile. "We're trying to avoid disruption. Please don't make this more difficult." From behind them, a soft female voice piped up from 3D. "Why don't you just check the barcode again?" the woman said. "He showed you the pass. Is that not enough?" Heather turned, smiled stiffly. "Ma'am, please let us handle this." The woman frowned and lifted her phone. The red circle of a live stream recording flickered against her fingers. Darius sat very still. Inside, his mind buzzed quietly, precisely. He had choices. He could escalate, raise his voice, demand, or he could wait. Wait for what was inevitable. His phone buzzed once. A text on the lock screen board meeting moved to Crisis Room 4A. "Awaiting your signal." He didn't smile, but his eyes narrowed. Heather stood there, staring at the boarding pass again. "This doesn't match what we have." "You must have scanned someone else's," Kyle muttered to her, unaware that several more phones had now been raised in nearby rows. "He's probably trying to upgrade himself. It happens." Darius closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "Would you like to see my ID as well?" he asked. Kyle didn't respond, so Darius reached into his jacket pocket and placed a sleek, minimalist leather wallet on the tray in front of him. He withdrew his driver's license, then, slowly, a silver business card etched in matte graphite. Kyle took the card. His lips parted. His face changed. Darius Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Cole Nova Group, Strategic Holdings Division. Heather blinked. The girl in 3D whispered into her stream, "Oh my God. Did you see that? I think he's someone big. Real big." Kyle took a half step back. The silence around them was spreading like frost. Darius leaned forward slightly. His voice didn't rise. "I'm not trying to make this hard. I just want what I paid for, what I earned. And I think you'll want to resolve this quickly." Heather didn't speak. Her hand dropped from the tablet. The businessman in 2C suddenly sat up straighter, phone in hand now too. Darius looked down at his watch. 14 minutes had passed. There were 31 minutes left before this entire flight and the people running it would have to answer for something much bigger than just a seating mix-up, and they had no idea what was coming. Flight 626 had not yet begun boarding economy, But the front cabin already felt crowded, not with passengers, but with tension. Every row in first class had at least one person, now quietly filming or texting, eyes flicking between Darius Cole and the airline staff like they were watching the early sparks of a courtroom trial. Heather Lang still hadn't moved. She stood next to seat 1A, tablet pressed to her side like a shield, eyes darting to Kyle Benton, the gate supervisor who had gone pale after reading Darius's business card. Kyle looked down again at the silver-etched text, as if hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something less consequential. Darius said nothing more. His documents lay in front of him, calmly displayed like puzzle pieces they refused to see. His boarding pass, his ID, his platinum airspan status card, and now, that business card. Kyle cleared his throat, posture shifting uncomfortably. "Mr. Cole, we'll need to consult with the gate team again. If you just step off the aircraft for a moment." Darius looked directly at him. Why, Kyle blinked. "Excuse me. You've seen my ID, my pass, my frequent flyer status, and now my company card. So again, I ask, why would I step off this plane?" Kyle hesitated. Heather jumped in. "Sir, you're making the other passengers uncomfortable." The irony of her words rippled through the cabin like a silent shockwave. Several passengers exchanged glances. One of them, Monica Fields. The nurse from 3 raised her voice gently. "No, he's not. He's sitting in his seat, quietly. You two are the only ones walking around raising voices." Heather's cheeks flushed pink. "Ma'am, I'd ask you not to interfere with airline operations." Monica scoffed. "I'm a nurse. I interfere when I see someone being mistreated, and this is starting to look a lot like mistreatment." Kyle looked over his shoulder, as if scanning for help that wasn't coming. The pilot appeared at the cabin door. Captain Dean Marshall was tall, clean-shaven, with pepper-gray hair and the posture of a man who took orders only from altitude. He walked forward with practiced authority, his expression unreadable. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, addressing no one in particular. Heather stepped in immediately. "This gentleman is refusing to vacate a first-class seat he doesn't have credentials for." Dean looked down at Darius, sizing him up in half a second. Hoodie, jeans, leather bag, no watch, no suit. He didn't even glance at the documents in front of Darius before speaking. "Sir, if you don't have the proper boarding information, I need you to comply. We have a schedule to maintain," Darius replied calmly. "Captain, my name is Darius Cole. I purchased this ticket. I've already provided ID and documentation to your staff, who have refused to verify it properly." Dean's jaw twitched. "Mr. Cole, I've been flying for over 20 years. I can tell when someone's trying to game the system," Monica snapped. "He's not gaming anything. He showed everything. You haven't even looked at the documents." Dean's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, I'd ask you to refrain." Monica interrupted. "Don't you dare ask me to be quiet when I'm watching something wrong unfold." Darius slowly picked up his phone. With steady fingers, he pressed record. "For the record," he said into the lens, "this is Darius Cole. It's currently 2:38 p.m. on Flight 626 to Seattle. I am sitting in the first-class seat I purchased, despite showing identification, status cards, and my boarding pass. I am being repeatedly asked to leave by airline staff who refuse to verify my information." Heather gasped. "Sir, filming on board is not permitted." Darius kept his gaze level. "I'm documenting an incident. That's very different from creating one." In the back of the cabin, a teenager in a hoodie whispered excitedly to her phone, "His name's Darius Cole. Look him up. I think he owns something big. As if on cue, Kyle's radio buzzed. Gate 4. This is Ops. We've got a situation trending. You've got media eyes now. Reassess. Immediately. Kyle's lips tightened. He leaned into the wall, lowered his voice. Captain, I think we need to be careful. But Dean wasn't listening. His voice rose instead. Mr. Cole, I'm giving you one final chance to comply or you will be escorted off. Darius didn't flinch. He tapped his earpiece. A soft tone sounded. Begin live transcription, he said. He looked at the pilot. I suggest you reconsider, because in 15 minutes, this plane won't be going anywhere until someone higher than you gives clearance. Dean chuckled, condescending. And who exactly are you planning to call? Darius turned his screen around. A text message sat at the top, unread, board seated, crisis room engaged. Call when ready. Heather's mouth dropped slightly. Captain Marshall stared at the screen, then at Darius. But before he could reply, a new voice entered the scene. Excuse me, a man said, walking down the aisle. He wore a sharp navy blue suit with a silver tie clip and carried a folded blazer over his arm. The kind of passenger everyone instinctively recognized as important. He paused at the row. Mr. Cole, he asked. I saw your interview at the summit last month. Your speech on equity and systems, it changed how we do hiring at my firm. Darius stood and shook his hand. Thank you. I appreciate that. The man turned to the captain. He's legit. If he says he belongs in this seat, believe him. Dean Marshall exhaled, jaw clenched, but said nothing. Another voice came from the back. I just looked him up, a woman said aloud. He's not just a CEO. His company owns a 19% stake in Airspan. Gasps followed. Heather took a step back. Kyle's radio chirped again. Urgent HQ just flagged an internal ownership alert. CEO of Cole Nova is on board Flight 626. Confirm immediately. Kyle looked up at Heather. We made a mistake, Heather whispered. I didn't know. He just didn't look like she stopped herself. Too late. Too loud, the teenager live streaming whispered. She said it. He didn't look like... And just like that, the clip went viral. A silence settled over the cabin like fog. Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply said, and that's the problem. Monica nodded, hand over her heart. In that silence, the plane didn't feel like a plane anymore. It felt like a courtroom. No judge, but plenty of witnesses, and judgment was already underway. Darius sat quietly in seat 1A. Around him, the tension still lingered like pressurized air, heavy and thick with unspoken truths. His hands rested gently on his thighs, fingers splayed, not clenched. His posture was perfect, not defensive, not aggressive, but still. There was power in stillness, and that was something Darius had learned a long time ago. He had once been told by a professor during his MBA program, when you walk into a room where no one expects you to have power, the loudest thing you can do is not explain yourself. And right now, every inch of that cabin expected him to either erupt or shrink. He did neither. Instead, he inhaled slowly through his nose and let the breath fill every part of him, his chest, his back, his arms, all the places that held the tension, the anger, the disappointment. He could feel it rising inside him. Not the fury, not yet. Something else, something heavier, that quiet ache, the one that came from knowing you weren't just fighting for yourself, but for every other person who'd been told without words that they didn't belong. He glanced around the cabin. Heather Lang had disappeared into the galley. Kyle Benton was whispering frantically into his radio, pacing beside the cockpit. Captain Dean Marshall stood stiffly near the bulkhead, arms folded, face flushed, jaw tight. And the passengers, they were watching. All of them. Some were still filming, some pretending not to. But every set of eyes was on him. He was no longer just a passenger. He was now a symbol. And Darius hated that. He never wanted to be anyone's symbol. He just wanted to fly to Seattle and meet with the city council about their smart grid infrastructure contract. He was supposed to land by 6, grab a cab, shake hands, get in, get out. But now, here he was, sitting in a seat he paid for, being asked, indirectly and directly, to give it up, because of how he looked, because of what they expected people like him to look like. His phone buzzed again in his hand. It was his assistant, Riley. Text board is waiting. Legal's in the room. We're greenlit for press escalation if you say so. He stared at the message for a long moment. Just one word, one reply. That's all it would take to ignite something larger. But Darius didn't respond. Not yet. He wasn't finished here. Monica Fields leaned toward him gently from 3D. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. Darius turned slightly, offered a small nod. "I'm fine." She hesitated, then smiled softly. That's the kind of fine people say when they're holding in a scream. He allowed a breath of a smile to tug at the corner of his mouth. "You're not wrong." She studied him for a beat. "I've been a nurse for 25 years. I've seen this kind of thing happen in ER waiting rooms, in hospital lobbies, in front of patients too afraid to say a word. And I never thought I'd see it at 30,000 feet. Darius turned his head to look out the window. Raindrops were beginning to snake down the curved glass, streaking in long, slow trails. The runway shimmered beyond the heat haze of jet exhaust. "I thought we were past this," he said finally. "Not the world. Me. I thought. I'd outgrown it, outranked it." He looked back toward her, voice low. "But there's no rank that makes you invisible to prejudice." Monica said nothing. She just nodded, lips tight with empathy. A chime sounded overhead. The crew had locked the cabin door, even though the plane hadn't moved. A flight delay warning flashed on the gate monitor outside. Passengers began murmuring. Tina Grace, the teenage streamer now seated in 4A, raised her phone again and spoke to her viewers. "Okay, guys, update flight 626 is officially delayed. Nobody said it's because of the situation in first class. But, I mean, come on. They still haven't apologized. This dude's calm as a monk, and they're treating him like he's about to hijack the snack cart." She zoomed in slightly. Darius's face was composed, but not blank. You could see the thought behind his eyes, the restraint, the careful calculation. She continued, "Like, what does it say when the most professional person on this flight is the one being asked to leave suddenly?" Captain Marshall moved. He strode back into the galley, disappearing from view. Kyle followed. Heather reappeared moments later, walking briskly to the aisle beside Darius. "I've been informed," she said stiffly, "that your credentials check out. You may remain in your seat. No apology, no acknowledgement, just cold, reluctant compliance." Darius turned his gaze toward her. "Miss Lang, would you mind repeating that I'm still recording?" She froze. Your documentation has been accepted." "Accepted?" he repeated. "Was it ever actually reviewed, or was it simply—" Assumed false Heather's voice tightened. "Sir, I've been advised not to comment further." "Of course. Darius ended the recording and saved the file. He didn't need her to say it. Everyone already knew what had happened. But the systems, plural, needed more than knowledge. It needed pressure, accountability. He tapped a new message on his phone and sent it to Riley. Text push statement draft to legal. Initiate level 2 response. Tina's stream popped with new comments. What is level 2? Response. Wait, is this man, Rich? Did y'all see her face? Kyle stepped out of the cockpit area, pale. He approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. Mr. Cole, I've been asked to deliver a statement from Airspan headquarters. They would like to personally apologize for any inconvenience and assure you they are launching an internal investigation. Darius didn't reply. He looked down, pulled his backpack up to his lap, and opened a side compartment. From inside, he retrieved a folder, a thin, cream-colored folder, stamped confidential, and placed it gently on the tray in front of him. He didn't open it, not yet, just placed it there, visible. Kyle stared at it, confused. What is that? Just some context, Darius replied. Across the aisle. Monica raised an eyebrow. Is this the part where it all turns? Darius glanced toward her. No. He gave a slight nod. This is the part where they realize it already has. He looked again out the window. The rain was easing, but inside the cabin of Flight 626 the pressure was only just beginning to rise. The flight hadn't even left the ground, but it had already taken off. The folder on Darius Cole's tray table remained untouched for a full 60 seconds. Yet somehow, its presence filled the entire first-class cabin. It didn't scream for attention. It didn't need to. It whispered authority. Passengers leaned slightly in their seats, eyes flicking toward the label stamped in raised serif lettering, Confidential. Kyle Benton stared at it the way a man might stare at a door labeled Do Not Enter, while realizing he had just walked through it backwards. Heather Lang, standing a few feet behind him, was suddenly very quiet. Darius didn't open the folder. Not yet. The power of anticipation was far more effective than any statement he could offer in that moment. And the cabin knew it. Outside, the rain had stopped. But inside, something else was gathering momentum. Tina Grace whispered to her phone again. Okay, update. The guy in 1A, his name's Darius Cole. CEO of Cole Nova Group, hasn't said much, but he's got this folder marked confidential. And people are saying he's triggering legal stuff right now. I think we're about to witness something huge. The live stream comment feed exploded. He owns part of the airline. This just went from drama to corporate warfare. Don't stop filming. Tina, the world needs to see this. In seat 3D, Monica Fields gently adjusted the scarf around her neck. She wasn't filming. She didn't need to. What was unfolding here would be carved into her memory in perfect clarity. She leaned toward Darius. That folder. You don't plan to open it unless they keep pushing, do you? Darius gave the faintest nod. Correct. Kyle swallowed hard. He glanced back toward the cockpit. Sir, he began, I'd like to personally apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. Darius turned his eyes toward him, steady and unblinking. Mr. Benton, this is not a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. And your airline just repeated it. Publicly. On camera. Multiple cameras. Kyle's jaw tightened. I understand that. But this doesn't have to go any further. It already has. Darius reached for his phone. Not to record. This time, he tapped twice and held it up to his ear. Riley answered on the second ring. Yes. Sir, activate the boardroom line. Tell legal to stand by. Have comms draft language for a public-facing statement. Non-litigious tone for now. But I want data references loaded in, especially policy violations on passenger treatment and the shareholder impact clause. Understood. He ended the call and placed the phone on the tray next to the folder. Several passengers were now openly watching, some mouths parted in disbelief. Darius looked toward the front of the aircraft. "Is your captain available?" Kyle blinked. "I'll check." He moved stiffly toward the cockpit. Heather followed, but Monica caught her by the sleeve gently. "Miss Lang." Heather turned, startled. "You're lucky," Monica said quietly. "He could have torn this place apart. He chose not to, but you still haven't apologized." Heather blinked. "I was following procedure." "No," Monica replied. "You were following prejudice disguised as protocol." Heather said nothing. Monica's voice softened. "I know the difference. I'm a black woman who works in a hospital. Trust me, I've lived that difference." Heather backed away slowly. The tension in the cabin shifted, like air being pulled out of a room before a storm. Captain Dean Marshall emerged from the cockpit. His hat was off now, hair slightly mussed, brow lined deeper than before. He looked at Darius, then at the passengers staring at him. The phones raised. The folder on the tray table. "Mr. Cole," he began, "I believe we may have handled things poorly. For that, I apologize." Darius didn't nod. He didn't speak. Marshall continued, "I've just been informed of your company's holdings in Airspan Airlines. I was unaware of your position. And there it was, the thing everyone knew, but no one wanted to say aloud." Darius' lips parted slightly. "You should have been aware of my boarding pass," he said, "before you judged my presence." Marshall stiffened. "We acted on the information provided at the time." "No," Darius said. "You acted on assumption. You had my boarding pass. You ignored it. You had my ID. You dismissed it. You saw me sitting in this seat, and you decided, before verifying, that I didn't belong." The words hung like fog. He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how many times that happens to people who look like me?" Marshall looked down. "Too many, I'm sure." Darius's voice didn't rise, but the pressure in it did. "You didn't just doubt me. You tried to remove me, and you did it in front of witnesses. You escalated instead of verified. You endangered your company, and you damaged your own reputation." Marshall looked back toward the cockpit. Darius reached forward and finally opened the folder. The sound of the paper shifting was nearly inaudible, but to the first-class cabin, it sounded like thunder. The top document was a letterhead memo. Cole Nova Group Strategic Holding Summary, Airspan Airlines. Equity stake 19.3%. Board voting rights Tier 2. The second page was worse. An email from the chief legal officer of Cole Nova, dated 3 days ago. Subject recommendation to review Airspan employee bias incidents. Suggested action if no improvement initiate divestment. Marshall stared. Kyle went pale again. Tina Grace whispered to her live stream, "Holy crap." He was already watching them. This wasn't random. This was systemic. And they just triggered it. Darius placed the memo face up on the tray. This was going to be a conversation next quarter. He said, "Now, it's going to be a statement. This incident will lead it." Marshall opened his mouth, then closed it again. Kyle looked down, shoulders slumped. Heather wasn't in the aisle anymore. She had vanished. Monica placed her hand on the armrest, steadying herself. Tears had gathered in her eyes, but not from sadness, from recognition, from release, from the aching, raw feeling of finally watching someone say what so many others had been forced to swallow. Darius looked around the cabin. To every person watching this on this plane, or online, I want you to know something. You don't fix a broken system by whispering to it. He paused. You speak directly. You speak clearly. You document everything, and you keep receipts. He lifted the memo one last time, folded it slowly, and slid it back into the folder. I've kept all of mine. And the cabin sat in silence, not out of discomfort, but out of collective awareness that something irreversible had just occurred. The plane had not yet left the runway, but the power dynamic, it had already taken flight. Captain Dean Marshall stood still, arms crossed. His eyes locked on the memo now returned to Darius Cole's folder. The temperature inside the aircraft hadn't changed, but the feeling in the cabin was undeniable. Whatever this had started it wasn't about seating anymore. It had become a reckoning. Darius closed the folder slowly, slid it back into his bag with the same calm he had shown since the moment Heather first questioned his presence. He didn't slam it. He didn't grandstand. He didn't even raise his voice. And somehow, that made every word feel louder. Kyle Benton stepped forward again, voice tighter than before. Mr. Cole, I've received a message from Airspan's executive team. They're asking if you'll accept a call before the flight departs. The CEO would like to speak with you directly. Darius gave a single nod. I'll take the call. But not in private. Kyle blinked. Sir, I said, not in private. He turned slightly toward the cabin, because the damage didn't happen in private. Monica's eyes welled again. She reached for a tissue, her hand shaking ever so slightly. Kyle nodded slowly and pulled out his radio. A flight attendant, not Heather, who had not returned, appeared with a company-issued tablet. It was a newer model, slim, polished. She handed it to Darius with quiet respect. Headset is linked. It's a secure line. He thanked her, slipped the earpiece over one ear, and tapped the screen. The call connected almost instantly. A woman's voice filled the line, clipped and professional, but unmistakably strained. Mr. Cole, this is Linda Hayworth, CEO of Airspan Airlines. I'm so sorry. Darius kept his voice measured. Ms. Hayworth, I trust you've been briefed. I have. And it's clear to me that you were treated unfairly. It's also clear that our internal safeguards failed. In multiple ways, Darius replied. Let's start with that. There was a pause on the line. Of course, she said. We want to do whatever it takes to make this right. Good, Darius said softly, his tone unwavering. Then you'll listen. Passengers were completely silent now. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the soft clicks of phones recording quietly in laps. Darius continued, This wasn't a one-off mistake. This was a systemic failure wrapped in individual judgment. From your flight attendant's initial assumption to the supervisor's dismissiveness to your captain's refusal to even check documentation. Linda began to speak, but Darius cut in gently. I'm not interested in individual punishments. Not yet. I'm interested in the system that allows this to keep happening. Yes, Linda said quickly. I understand. That's why I want your input. Then here are my conditions, Darius said. First, a full audit of Airspan's passenger incident reports involving racial bias from the last 5 years. External review, not internal. A pause. Then, agreed. Second, Darius went on, mandatory bias recognition training for all customer-facing staff within the next 30 days. Done, Linda replied. Third, he said, A public statement, not just about this incident, but about what your company intends to change. Transparency. Commitment. No PR fluff. Another pause. Then a resigned, understood. Darius's voice softened, but did not lose force. The seat was never the issue. Linda, I know, she whispered. I see that now. No, he said gently. You're starting to see. But seeing isn't enough. Fixing is. Linda was quiet for a long breath. I'll issue a statement tonight, she said, and I'll authorize everything you've requested. Would you be willing to help us draft the reform plan? Darius looked out the window. That depends, he said. Are you asking for input, or asking to borrow my credibility to clean your brand? There was no answer at first. Then, in a voice more human than executive, she said, I'm asking for help. Because clearly, we don't know what we're doing. Darius nodded once, though she couldn't see it. Then we'll begin with the truth. He ended the call. The cabin didn't applaud. No one moved. They just sat with it, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Monica leaned forward. Mr. Cole, that was... He glanced over. Necessary. He finished for her. She smiled. Yes, that. At that moment, Tina Grace's phone buzzed loudly. She glanced down. Guys, she whispered to her live stream. The Airspan homepage just changed. They issued a holding statement. It says, and I quote, We are in active dialogue with shareholder and CEO Darius Cole, following a discriminatory incident aboard Flight 626. Comments rolled in. His name's on the homepage, wild. Corporate America just got baptized. I'm not even on the flight, and I feel healed. Kyle Benton looked dazed, standing to the side of the aisle like a man slowly waking up inside his own mistake. He wasn't the villain. Not entirely, but he had been part of the machine. The one that defaulted to disbelief when dignity required something else. Monica turned to him. Did you hear that Kyle nodded? You're lucky, she said gently. He chose to build. Someone else would have burned this down. He didn't respond. Darius sat back in his seat, finally picking up his paperback for the first time since the confrontation began. But he didn't read. Not yet. Instead, he reached for his phone, tapped out a quick message to Riley. Text agreement reached. Statement to follow. Begin tracking policy reform compliance monthly. This isn't a press win. It's a systems test. He set the phone down. Then, softly, to no one in particular, he spoke. You don't change the world with press conferences. You change it with follow-through. Monica heard him. So did Tina. So did everyone. Across the country, major news outlets were already picking up the livestream clips. Headlines forming in real time. Flight 626 incident sparks corporate reforms. Black CEO forces airline to confront systemic bias at 30,000 feet. And perhaps most notably, the seat was never the issue. Why Darius Cole may have just changed air travel forever. But inside the cabin, the man himself said nothing more. He simply opened to page 12 of his novel and began to read. The engines of Flight 626 finally stirred with a low hum, signaling that the aircraft was preparing to taxi. But for many on board, the real journey had already begun. Phones were still up, not because of spectacle now, but something else. Documentation had become a form of solidarity. Monica Fields watched Darius Cole from 2 rows back, not out of curiosity, but out of instinct. She had spent a lifetime reading body language patients trying to hide fear, nurses too exhausted to admit they were overwhelmed, administrators trying to downplay what they didn't understand. And now, Darius. He looked composed, still, but there was a heaviness beneath the surface. The kind of fatigue that doesn't show up in posture, but in the quiet between breaths. He turned a page in his book, but hadn't read a single line in the last 3 minutes. She stood and quietly stepped forward. A few passengers glanced up but said nothing. Darius noticed her, and his eyes softened when she approached. "You mind if I sit here for a moment?" she asked, nodding toward the empty seat beside him. He gestured to it without a word. Monica slid into the seat, folding her hands in her lap. "You okay?" Darius didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the window, then toward the front of the plane. "I'm used to this," he said finally. "I shouldn't be, but I am." Monica nodded. "That's what makes it worse, the way it trains us to expect insult." He looked at her, his voice quieter now. "I've spent years in boardrooms with people who smile to your face while underestimating your voice. I've been told I was intimidating when I asked a direct question. I've had my ideas credited to someone else, and I've had to sit in rooms after being profiled like a threat, just to lead strategy for the very systems that exclude people like me." She listened, saying nothing, letting the weight land. "This seat, money," he continued. "It wasn't about comfort. It was about peace, about buying a moment where I didn't have to prove myself to anyone." He exhaled through his nose. "But there's no peace in a system that always sees you as a suspect before it sees you as a human." Monica leaned slightly forward. "Do you want to know what hit me hardest today?" Darius looked over, inviting her in. "It wasn't when she questioned your seat. It was when she refused to believe your pass. The way she barely looked at your ID, like no matter what paper you had, it would never be enough." Darius nodded. "That's the moment it shifts from bias to betrayal." She tilted her head. "How so?" He paused. "Bias is when someone doesn't know better. Betrayal is when they choose not to look. When the evidence is there and they still assume you're lying." Monica's eyes brimmed slightly, but she blinked it away. "It shouldn't have taken your company stake or your CEO card for them to take you seriously." Darius's lips pulled into a faint, tired smile. "That's the irony. People see the power now, but they miss the point." He tapped the cover of his paperback. "I didn't ask to be treated like a CEO. I asked to be treated like a person." The plane turned gently, the engine steady now. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, the quiet hum deepening. Monica sat with him in that silence, not to fix it, just to share it. After a few moments, she asked, "Do you regret speaking up?" Darius looked at her, startled by the question, but not offended. "No," he said. Then, after a pause, "But I regret that I had to." She nodded again, slowly. "That makes two of us." They sat there, side by side, as the plane finally pulled away from the gate. But the flight wasn't the only thing moving forward. In a downtown media studio in New York, a panel discussion was going live on national television. In Chicago, a law professor had just paused her lecture to show the class the unfolding clips. On Twitter, the hashtag #YarDariusCole had overtaken 4 global trends, and on the homepage of several airline watchdog websites, a single image was leading every article: Darius Cole, seated calmly in 1A, holding a boarding pass, and being questioned. One headline read, "The calm before the policy change." Another, more pointed, "When dignity isn't enough." The Darius Cole moment. Inside the cockpit, Captain Dean Marshall tapped his headset. "Tower. This is Flight 626 requesting runway clearance." The voice on the other end responded with routine precision. unaware that the passengers inside weren't just preparing for takeoff, but witnessing the start of a cultural shift. Back in the cabin, Monica stood to return to her seat. Before she did, she looked down at Darius one more time. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For not letting this moment shrink you." He met her eyes. "I stopped shrinking a long time ago." She smiled and returned to 3D. A few rows back, Tina Grace was typing rapidly. Her phone buzzed again and again with notifications. She wasn't even speaking into her stream now. She was just documenting, watching. But in her draft notes, one line stood out. Flight 626 changed something. Not because he fought loud, but because he didn't flinch. Darius glanced back down at his book. He tried again to read, but another text came in. It was Riley. Request from CNN. Interview within the hour. Also, MSNBC and NPR. Your call. He stared at the message. He was tired. Not physically. That he could handle. But soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that builds not from the work you do, but from the things you have to keep proving. He replied with one line. "Let's wait. Let the story breathe." He placed the phone face down. He wasn't chasing headlines. He was watching something larger unfold, and it wasn't about him anymore. Not entirely. Because somewhere, a kid was watching this. Somewhere, a young black executive in a cheap suit was watching this unfold with a strange mixture of rage and hope. And Darius wanted them to know, you don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to be unshakable. Cruising altitude came 32 minutes after departure. The fasten seatbelt sign faded. The lights dimmed to soft gold. Trays began unfolding. Attendants began pouring water with robotic calm. And the cabin settled into a rhythm that pretended nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone knew better. No one had forgotten the confrontation at the gate. The captain's refusal to look at a boarding pass. The silence when the truth emerged. The quiet moment when the man in 1A placed a confidential folder on his tray and changed the tone of the entire flight. Darius Cole had opened more than documents that afternoon. He'd opened a mirror. And now, even as the clouds passed silently outside his window, the aftershocks were still being felt across the sky. He leaned back slightly in his seat, eyes half closed. He wasn't sleeping, but he was resting. The kind of rest you take between battles, not after them. Someone cleared their throat gently nearby. Darius opened his eyes to find a young woman standing quietly beside his seat. She was in her late 20s, maybe 30, curly dark hair tied in a low bun, a neatly pressed button down, and nervous hands clutching a canvas tote. She looked like she was trying not to fidget. He sat up. "Mr. Cole," she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, my name's Savannah. I'm in 9C. Sorry to bother you. I needed to say something. It won't take long." He gestured toward the empty aisle seat beside him. "Go ahead." She hesitated, then sat. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I watched everything happen at the gate. And I want to thank you." He raised an eyebrow slightly. She seemed younger than most of the passengers who had spoken up. But there was something heavier in her eyes, a story trying to reach the surface. "I'm not thanking you as a live streamer," she said quickly. "I didn't post anything. I didn't record. I didn't even speak up. I wanted to, but I froze. And that's what's bothering me." Darius shook his head gently. People freeze when they're scared or overwhelmed. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Savannah's shoulders sagged slightly with the relief of not being judged. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph, worn at the edges. "This is my mother," she said, placing the photo gently in his palm. He looked down. A black woman, probably early 40s in the picture, standing in front of a small regional aircraft with a duffel bag over one shoulder. Her smile was gentle, her posture unsure. She was a nurse, Savannah said. She worked 2 jobs. Never complained. Just kept going. Darius nodded slowly, absorbing the image. She flew airspan once. Savannah continued. 20 years ago. Just once. She saved up for a trip to see her mother in Georgia. Bought herself a first-class ticket. Wanted to feel like she belonged there, even if just for once. Darius didn't need to hear the rest, but he listened anyway. They made her move to the back, told her there was a booking error. She didn't argue. She was too embarrassed, but she cried the whole flight. Quietly. She never flew again after that. Darius's hands closed slightly around the photo. "I was 6, Savannah whispered. "I didn't understand it then, but now I do." She looked him directly in the eyes. "And today, I watched someone else try to do that to you. But you didn't move. You stayed in your seat. You didn't let them decide who you were." Darius' throat tightened. "I'm sorry your mother went through that," he said quietly. Savannah shook her head. "She would have wanted me to tell you. And to thank you for sitting in that seat. For her." He exhaled, and something cracked slightly in his voice when he spoke again. "I didn't do this to inspire anyone. I just couldn't walk away from another moment of being quietly erased." "I know," Savannah replied, "but that's why it worked." There was a stillness between them for a moment, a kind of reverent pause. Savannah stood slowly. "Would it be all right if I left that photo with you?" Darius looked at it again, then met her gaze. "I'd be honored." She nodded, gave a small smile, and returned to row 9. Darius held the photo for another long minute, his thumb tracing the edge where the lamination had begun to peel. Then he reached into his folder and placed the picture gently inside. It didn't belong to the corporate reports or the shareholder documents, but somehow it belonged more than anything else, because it was the why. It was the reason this mattered. Not for cameras, not for claps, but because someone else, long ago, was told to sit in the back when she paid for the front, and no one fought for her. The seat wasn't just a seat. It was history refusing to repeat itself. Riley's text buzzed again on his phone. Legal finalized the press copy. Final call before release. Do we go public tonight or hold until morning? Darius didn't reply immediately. He stared out the window, where a thin break in the clouds revealed a wash of orange as the sun began to fall westward. He thought about Savannah's mother, about all the names he'd never know, the men and women who folded their tickets and their dignity into the cracks of systems that never apologized. He typed back slowly, schedule for morning, but leaked the image of the boarding pass. Let the public connect the dots first. He hit send, and then, for the first time since boarding the plane, he leaned back in his seat and let the tension in his shoulders release. Across the aisle, Monica looked over, saw the shift in his posture, and smiled. From row 4, Tina Grace's stream continued broadcasting quietly to nearly 42,000 live viewers. But for now, inside seat 1A, the man at the center of it all sat in peace. Not because justice had been fully served, but because something sacred had just happened. He had been given someone's story and trusted to carry it forward. The wheels touched down at exactly 4:38 pour, a gentle bounce, then a long, humming exhale of tires against tarmac. The passengers of Flight 626 barely stirred. No one clapped. No one rushed to stand. It wasn't that they weren't relieved to land. It was that the real turbulence hadn't even begun. Darius sat upright, shoulders squared, eyes open, not tired, not tense, but centered. He could feel something shifting in the air, thicker than jet fuel and more electric than pressure change. He unfastened his belt. From his seat in 1A, he could see the gate through the window. There were cameras, a lot of them. Someone had leaked the flight's tail number. Maybe a ground crew member. Maybe one of the thousands watching Tina's live stream. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. The story had broken containment, and he hadn't said a single word to the press. Yet, he reached down, pulled his satchel out from beneath the seat, and gently tucked Savannah's photograph into the side compartment. He didn't want it buried. He wanted it close. Behind him, passengers whispered, "That's him. Did you see the clip with the boarding pass? He's gonna change everything." But Darius didn't bask. He didn't correct. He didn't shrink. He waited. The door chime rang, and the flight attendant on a different one now smiled faintly and stepped back to open the cabin. A gate agent stepped on board. He was young, maybe 24, sweating beneath his blazer, eyes wide, nervous, reverent. He approached Darius slowly. "Mr. Cole, I've been asked to escort you off the plane first. There's a media presence and a company rep waiting outside." Darius stood, adjusted the collar of his blazer, and looked the young man directly in the eye. "Thank you," he said. The agent blinked, surprised at the kindness, then turned to lead the way. As Darius stepped into the jet bridge, the flashbulbs didn't erupt immediately. There was a pause, the kind that happens when people aren't sure if they're witnessing a scandal or a shift. Then came the clicks, then the shouting, then the microphones. "Mr. Cole, what did you say to the CEO? Is it true you demanded systemic reform? Are you suing the airline?" Darius stopped walking. He turned to the crowd not with fury, not with shame, but with the steady presence of someone who had been preparing for this his entire life. He held up a single finger. "I'll say this once," he said calmly. Silence fell, like a curtain. "This story isn't about me." He scanned the sea of lenses and hands. "This story is about what happens when we normalize suspicion. When we build entire systems around the assumption that some people don't belong where they rightfully paid to be." A single camera flashed. I wasn't humiliated today. I was reminded that our work isn't done, that access without dignity is not progress, that having a ticket isn't the same as having equal ground. Reporters stood motionless. No one interrupted. I don't want apologies. I want audits. I don't want platitudes. I want policies. And I don't want to be the exception, because if I'm the only one protected by a CEO title, then we've already failed. He paused, then softened. "My name is Darius Cole. I'm the CEO of Colnova Group. But before that, I was the son of a nurse who taught me to move through this world with dignity, even when that world made it hard." He took a breath. "I'm not angry. I'm not broken. I'm awake. And I hope everyone watching this chooses to wake up, too." He stepped away from the mic. The young gate agent looked like he might cry. And somewhere in the press line, Savannah, now holding up her phone, whispered into her live mom, "He said your name without even knowing it." The Airspan spokesperson stepped forward next, nervous, sweating, practiced but shaking. Airspan Airlines recognizes the seriousness of this incident. He read, We are working directly with Mr. Cole to ensure this moment becomes a catalyst for industry-wide change, effective immediately. We have begun a third-party investigation into all frontline operations, and our CEO will personally oversee the implementation of anti-bias measures across every domestic and international route. But few were listening anymore. They were still watching Darius, because some people speak once and are remembered forever. As he walked toward the terminal, Riley met him just past security, holding out a phone. "It's the White House. Communications director wants a quote for tomorrow's press briefing. You're trending in 17 countries." Darius blinked. How Riley showed him the screen. A tweet had gone viral. Just 12 words. He didn't fight for a seat. He fought for all of us. No hashtags, just resonance. Darius exhaled. "I'm not giving quotes right now," he said. Riley nodded. "What should I say? Tell them I'll speak when they're ready to listen." He turned toward the terminal exit, toward a car waiting to take him to a hotel where journalists and executives and maybe even senators were already waiting to meet with him. But first, he stopped at a bench just outside baggage claim. Sat down, took out his phone, opened a blank email, and started writing. To Savannah. Subject: your mother's seat body. You told me your mother gave up her seat. She didn't. They took it. And today, she got it back. He hit send, then sat there quietly, letting the world catch up. The suite was on the 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass, polished oak conference table, every chair leather-bound, except for the one Darius chose that had arms rubbed smooth by years of anxious elbows. He didn't come alone. Riley sat beside him, a quiet wall of loyalty. Across the table sat 5 executives. One was Airspan's legal counsel. One was the VP of PR. 2 more wore the exhausted expressions of men who hadn't slept since the story broke. And at the far end sat Linda Hayworth, CEO of Airspan, silver-haired, shrewd eyes, a tailored navy suit. She looked at Darius not with superiority, but with the uneasy curiosity of someone used to control and now facing the one man she couldn't predict. He didn't blink. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole," she began, folding her hands. "Let's begin with honesty. This has turned into something none of us anticipated." He tilted his head slightly. "That depends who us is." Linda's jaw tensed. The others didn't interrupt. "I'll be direct," she said. "Our board has voted unanimously to issue a formal apology, publicly, and to establish a racial bias review panel. We'd like your input on that, privately, if possible." Riley scribbled something on his notepad but didn't speak. Darius leaned forward. "I don't want an apology." That made the room shift. Linda blinked. "You don't? No. Apologies are easy. They cost nothing. They expire." He opened his satchel and pulled out 2 folders. One he slid toward Linda. The other he kept. "This is a full audit of your boarding and cabin staff bias complaints from the last 3 years. It includes anonymized customer reports and internal memos that were never escalated." The legal counsel leaned in. The PR executive frowned. "How did you?" Darius interrupted. Calmly. "I own shares, enough to request records. You granted them. You didn't realize who I was when you did. That's not on me." He opened the second folder and began reading aloud. May 12th, 2022. Passenger reports being randomly reassigned after presenting first-class boarding pass. Quote, "Attendant said I must have stolen it." He flipped the page. October 9th, 2023. Black couple traveling with 2 children. Staff requested they show additional identification despite valid documents. Quote, "No other families in line were asked." Another page, January 4th, 2024. Woman denied upgrade despite availability. Later overheard gate agent say, "We don't want people like that up front." He closed the folder gently. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about pattern." Linda looked down at the folder in front of her. "And what do you want from us?" He met her eyes. "I want your systems torn down and rebuilt, with public oversight. And I want every person who's been denied dignity to know that your silence didn't win." The legal counsel cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, to be clear, you're suggesting a complete operational overhaul." "No, Darius said. "I'm insisting on it." Linda's gaze didn't falter, but her fingers tapped once, slowly, against the table. This would cause stock disruption. It would invite lawsuits. It would fracture investor confidence. Darius folded his hands. "You don't need investor confidence right now. You need public trust." Silence fell. Riley broke it with a calm voice. Darius could issue a statement today, call for a boycott, or he could wait. Let the public storm carry it through. But that's not what he came here for. Linda looked at her team, then back at Darius. "And if we agree to your terms, you don't agree to me," Darius said. "You agree to change. I don't want a seat at your boardroom table. I want every kid watching this story to know that first class isn't a boundary. It's a booking option." The VP of PR let out a slow breath. "You've already won public sentiment." Darius nodded. "But I'm not fighting for sentiment. I'm fighting for structure." For a moment, no one said anything. Then Linda leaned back and spoke quietly. "Would you chair the Independent Oversight Council?" Darius looked up. "I will advise it. I won't chair it." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because I won't be your shield. You don't get to place a black man in a visible role and call it reform. You build real change, and you put power behind it, not optics." That landed. Linda glanced at the folder again, then nodded once. "We'll draft a contract tonight." Darius stood. "No, you'll draft a commitment. And tomorrow, I'll help make sure the world sees whether you honor it." As he walked out, one of the younger staffers in the hallway looked up from her phone. She was holding back tears. "You changed the conversation," she whispered as he passed. Darius didn't turn around. "I didn't," he said softly. "I just refused to leave the room." Outside, the air smelled like city heat and traffic fumes. Riley caught up beside him, offering a quiet fist bump. Darius returned it. "You really think they'll follow through?" Riley asked. Darius looked at the skyscrapers stretching into the sky. "They will now." And for the first time all day, he smiled. The city auditorium wasn't glamorous. It was the kind of place where PTA meetings were held, where school choirs performed to half-full rooms. But tonight, every seat was taken. No lights, no red carpet, just the soft buzz of folding chairs and a line of people that wrapped around the block residents, workers, elders, students, all gathered for one thing: a conversation that had been silenced for decades. At the front, a small sign read A. Span Accountability Forum, Open Mic, All Voices Heard. Darius hadn't planned to attend. He didn't even know about it until a local organizer named Celeste personally handed Riley a flyer at a cafe that afternoon. No press, no politics, just people. She'd said, "Tell him to come, but only if he's ready to listen." So he came, not in a suit, but a simple dark sweater. No entourage, just Riley and the quiet weight of knowing that something far bigger than a corporate scandal was unfolding now. When Darius entered, no one stood, no one applauded, but a wave of stillness moved through the room like someone had just opened a window. He took a seat in the third row, on stage, A mic stood alone, one spotlight above it. Then a voice called out from the wings, "Who'd like to speak?" A woman in her 60s walked slowly to the front. Her name tag read Cynthia. Her cane clicked softly against the wood floor. She adjusted the mic. I was told in 1987 that my blouse wasn't appropriate for business class. It was a white blouse, just a little worn. I'd saved for months for that ticket. She didn't cry. She just stood there, strong in her stillness. "I walked back to coach," she said, "but I left something in that seat that I didn't get back for years. My dignity." No one clapped. This wasn't a show. It was memory, truth, and one by one, others followed. A college student named Ramon who'd been profiled for carrying a backpack that looked suspicious. A father who'd been separated from his autistic son mid-boarding because someone thought he was too agitated to fly. A flight attendant, retired now, who admitted on mic, with shaking hands, that she'd been trained to look for trouble in the faces of young black men traveling alone. Each story wasn't just a wound. It was a document, and every word etched itself into Darius's chest. Then a pause, a hush, and a woman in the back raised her hand. She walked slowly, wearing a faded floral dress. No name tag, no intro. When she reached the mic, she simply said, "My name is Edna Holt, and I held my daughter while she cried after being told her seat was mistakenly issued." That was in 1994. Her voice didn't tremble, but her hands did. She had bought that ticket with her first tax refund, worked at a diner, wanted to visit her sister in Atlanta. First time flying. Darius froze. She never flew again, never even drove near the airport. Said it made her chest feel like it was collapsing. He knew. Savannah's mother. Edna looked up, straight at him. "She passed away 3 years ago, but I just want her name spoken, out loud, somewhere, because she mattered." Darius stood slowly, walked to the stage, and before anyone could object, he reached for the second mic, positioned just beside hers. "Her name was Angela Holt," he said quietly. The room was silent. "She had a daughter named Savannah, who told me what happened, and gave me her photo." Edna pressed a hand to her heart. Darius looked out at the crowd. "I've been in boardrooms," he said. "I've been in lawsuits, but I've never been in a room this honest." He paused. "And I don't want to lead this movement. I want to serve it." That single sentence cracked something open in the crowd. A young girl near the back whispered to her mother, "He's not here to fix it. He's here to feel it." And maybe that's what changed everything. Not a policy, not a press release, but a man who could have walked away, choosing instead to walk through it. Darius looked at Edna. She didn't lose her voice. "He said, she gave it to you. And tonight, you gave it to all of us." He didn't say anything else. He stepped back, returned to his seat, and simply listened. For 2 more hours. To every person, every memory, every grief. He didn't correct. He didn't defend. He just held space for what had always deserved it. And when the forum ended, no cameras, no reporters people lined up not to shake his hand, but to speak their truth, to someone who wouldn't look away. That night, as Darius stepped outside into the cool wind, Riley handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. Someone passed it forward, said it wasn't a story, just something for you. He opened it, handwritten, in blue ink. First class doesn't mean first worth, but when someone stands up in it, they make room for all of us. Darius folded the paper, placed it in his pocket, and stood in the parking lot for a long time, not as a CEO, but as a witness, and a man who finally understood. The seat wasn't the symbol. The people were. The chamber smelled like wood polish and history. It was the kind of room where laws were born, where words became consequences. The seal of the United States hung behind the senator's dais, casting a quiet authority that dared anyone to blink first. Darius Cole didn't blink. He sat at the center of a long table. In front of him, a slender nameplate, black letters on brushed brass. Behind him, Riley, seated in the gallery, notebook in hand. Microphones hummed faintly, cameras rolled in the corners, and all across the country, televisions flickered to life. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. The chairwoman, Senator Evelyn Hayes, adjusted her glasses and leaned into her mic. Mr. Cole, thank you for appearing before this committee. We are investigating the allegations of systemic bias within Airspan Airlines and the broader implications for airline policy enforcement. Darius nodded once. Thank you, Senator. She continued, formal and steady. We've reviewed your public statement, the footage from Flight 626, and the written testimonies from affected passengers. Your advocacy has mobilized federal attention. But before we proceed, I'll yield 5 minutes to Senator Grayson. A pause. Then the man to her left, Senator Russell Grayson of Kentucky, leaned forward, his tone already sharp. Mr. Cole, he said, voice cool. Would you describe yourself as a public figure? Darius met his gaze evenly. I suppose I am now. Grayson tapped a file on the table. Cole Nova Group. Valuation at $9 billion. Private jet ownership. Stock in 8 airlines, including Airspan. Don't you think that puts you in a position of conflict? The air thickened. Darius didn't flinch. Conflict only exists when power protects itself. He replied, I'm not protecting mine. Some murmurs in the chamber. Grayson pressed on. You were given a first-class seat. Correct, I paid for it. And when you were asked to verify it, I was denied before I had a chance to show it. Grayson raised an eyebrow. But you could have shown it. De-escalated the situation. Chosen diplomacy. Darius leaned in slightly. Senator, if the only way I'm allowed to exist peacefully is by surrendering dignity, that's not diplomacy. That's compliance. A quiet intake of breath from the gallery. Grayson frowned. This isn't about your feelings. Mr. Cole? No, Darius said. It's about everyone's safety, including those who don't get the luxury of being presumed innocent at 30,000 feet. Senator Hayes intervened gently. Mr. Cole, if I may redirect, what reform do you believe is possible at the federal level? Darius reached for the folder in front of him. No theatrics, just paper, ink, and the kind of preparation born from years of restraint. I've outlined 5 policy proposals, he said calmly, including mandatory bias response training, anonymous passenger complaint platforms, and oversight boards that include civilian reviewers, not just airline insiders. He handed a copy to the clerk. Airlines aren't public utilities, but they operate in public interest, which means they don't just carry passengers, they carry responsibility. Somewhere behind him. Riley smiled faintly. Grayson, however, wasn't done. I reviewed your background, the senator said. Born in Camden, single mother, scholarships, startups, now a billionaire. He held up a printout of a news headline. From public housing to private jet, the rise of Darius Cole. Isn't it fair to say that this country gave you every opportunity to succeed? Darius looked at him for a long moment, then answered quietly. This country gave me the opportunity to work 10 times harder to be seen as half as safe. Silence. You call that opportunity. I call that a burden. The room shifted again. No longer just a policy hearing. Now a pulse. Now a mirror. Senator Hayes cleared her throat. "I believe what Mr. Cole is saying," she said slowly, "is that mobility without equity isn't justice." She turned to Darius. "Would you serve as a public advisor to this committee as we consider federal reform?" He hesitated, not out of fear, but out of memory. Angela Holt, Edna, Cynthia, Savannah, and every person whose name wouldn't be etched in any hearing transcript. "I will," he said, "but only if the process remains transparent and if survivors are heard first." Senator Hayes nodded, agreed, and just like that, the air changed. The chamber wasn't just observing anymore. It was listening. When the hearing ended, reporters surged forward. Flashbulbs popped. Questions flew. "Mr. Cole, is this the start of a national movement? What about Airspan's leadership? Should they resign? Are you planning to run for office?" Darius paused at the top of the Capitol steps. He looked out not at the microphones, but at the crowd beyond the gates. There were students, workers, mothers with children, and a small boy holding a cardboard sign that simply read, "Let us board in peace." He looked back at the press. "I'm not running for anything," he said. "I'm standing for something." And then he turned, walked down the steps, not elevated above anyone, but alongside them. The morning light in Oakland was softer than he remembered. Darius Cole stood at his window, coffee in hand, watching the way the fog crept over the bay. It had been 3 weeks since the hearing, 2 since Airspan released their internal report, 4 days since President Willis signed the Airline Passenger Equity Directive. But he wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about the letter taped to his front door. No envelope, just a folded paper in black ink, childlike handwriting. It read, "My mom said I could fly now because of you. She cried when she said it. I've never seen her cry. Thank you. No name, no return address, just a crayon drawing of a plain-colored blue, with little smiling faces in every window." Darius closed his eyes. There had been press releases, press conferences, photo ops, but none of them landed like this. He turned from the window and walked into the living room where Riley sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through letters stacked in boxes. "I thought this would slow down," Riley muttered. "It won't," Darius replied softly. Riley held up a letter. "This one's from a retired pilot. Says he was ashamed of what he used to ignore. Another, here's one from a janitor at JFK. She says watching you speak made her stand taller. Then a third." Riley's hands paused. He passed it over. Darius opened it slowly. Inside was a photo. 2 women, one older, one young, sitting together in first class, smiling. Written in delicate cursive beneath it, "Angela finally flew with me. Took her 30 years. But we made it. Thank you for giving her wings. Edna Holt." His throat closed. He remembered Edna's voice in the community forum, the tremble in her hands, the quiet defiance in her daughter's name. Angela had flown. That would have been enough. But the world kept turning, and with it, the ripple widened. In Houston, a major airline announced their partnership with historically black colleges for inclusive training pipelines. In Boston, gate agents began wearing small pincer-plane wings formed by clasped hands. No corporate logo, just a quiet stand. In Atlanta, a 12-year-old girl named Malia gave a school presentation titled "Why Everyone Deserves a Seat." They sent the video. Darius watched it 3 times, and every time she said, "Because first class should never mean first human," he felt something soften inside him. That night, He walked to the old garage where his mother used to keep their family albums. The place still smelled like paint thinner and dust. He found the box labeled Camden Days. Inside, a photo of his younger self at a bus stop. His shoes didn't match. His backpack was torn. But he was smiling wide and proud, holding a library card like it was gold. He sat there for a long time. Then Riley knocked gently on the door. "Airspan wants a final meeting." Darius looked up. "They say it's symbolic," Riley added. "New uniforms, diversity audit results, a formal commitment plaque. Send them a reply," Darius said. "I'll meet them." 2 days later, he boarded a flight, seat 2A. But this time, no security hovered, no eyes narrowed, no whispers followed him. Instead, a young flight attendant smiled as she checked his name on the manifest. "Mr. Cole," she said. "It's an honor to have you with us." He nodded once. "Thank you." She leaned down, whispered, "My dad used to be afraid to fly, and now he won't shut up about his frequent flyer miles." He smiled. In the seat beside him sat a little girl, maybe 9 or 10, reading a book about planets. She looked up, curious. "Are you important?" she asked bluntly. Darius chuckled. "I'm just visiting some people, because they gave you this big seat. My mom says only really important people sit up here." He thought for a moment, then said, "Everyone's important." She squinted at him. "Even the ones who clean the plane. Especially them." She went back to her book, and for the rest of the flight, they said nothing. Just two travelers, 30,000 feet above the noise. When the plane landed, he walked into the Airspan headquarters not as a guest, but as someone whose story had rewritten the company's legacy. Linda Hayworth greeted him with a handshake. No cameras, no microphones, just quiet respect. "I wanted to show you this," she said, leading him to the lobby wall. A new plaque had been installed. Metal, clean font, etched in both English and Braille. It read, "The Dignity Directive." This airline recognizes that a seat is not a privilege, it's a right, and that every passenger deserves to fly with dignity, equity, and respect. We honor those whose voices made us better. March 2025. He looked at it for a long time, not for the recognition, but for what it meant. It was no longer his story. It was everyone's. As he turned to leave, he passed the break room. A janitor was mopping the floor, earbuds in, quietly humming. Darius paused. He walked over. "Thank you," he said. The janitor blinked. "For what?" "For keeping things clean when no one's watching." The man smiled. "That's where all the real work happens." They nodded to each other. No flashbulbs, just truth. Oh. That night, back at home, Darius sat on his porch. Savannah texted him a photo of her graduation cap. She was heading to law school. Said she wanted to change policy from the inside. Tina Grace, the streamer, messaged him a short clip, passengers of every color, laughing. Boarding a plane. The caption read, "Look who's in first class now." And then Riley stepped out with a small box. "What's this?" Darius asked. "From me?" Inside was a model airplane. Wooden. Hand-carved. But where the airline name usually went. It just said equal altitude. They sat in silence, watching the sky darken. No one said it, but they both knew the world didn't go back to normal. It went forward, because one man, one voice, one moment refused to sit in silence, and instead chose to rise. We started with a man, a seat, and a silent insult at 30,000 feet. But what we witnessed was far greater. Darius Cole didn't raise his voice. He raised the bar. He reminded us that respect isn't granted by a boarding pass. It's a right we all carry from economy to first class, from janitor to jet owner. This wasn't just about one flight. It was about every passenger who's ever been told they were too loud, too different, too much. Every Angela Holt who walked back to coach in silence. Every little girl who thought she didn't belong at the front of the plane. Through Darius, they were all heard. And in a world that so often rewards noise, he proved something rare. The quiet truth can be the loudest sound in the room. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, feel, remember, or hope, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because the more we tell stories like this, the fewer stories of injustice we'll have to endure. And the more people will learn that dignity doesn't ask for permission. It simply boards and takes its rightful seat. See you in the next story.